So this is part 39 of our Wild Harvest Edibles. Thou preparest a table before me. And as we have been our habit as we've begun these presentations, just a reminder that as you navigate any health challenge, it's always recommended that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of the care of the human body in disease and in health. And the information that we provide here is educational in nature, and you can put that in your wellness toolbox just as another tool. Others have used these things for the various things that they're shared for, but that you should do your own due diligence before you do any treatment protocol or procedure, not blindly accepting anything without doing your due diligence and understanding things to the best of your ability. Thomas Edison said that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. And we know that he was well ahead of his time when he framed those words. And in fact, we have some very poignant words that were shared with us by Ellen White in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5. There are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for which the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and a clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all, with but little expense. But drugs are expensive, both in the outlay of financial means and the effect produced upon the system. And of course, God wants us to be in health, and he states that through 3 John 1:2, beloved, I pray that you prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. And as our soul prospers, if our soul is not prospering, if it is very weighed down by the cares of this world, by guilt, by fear, that definitely has health implications that are profound. In Romans 12:1-2, Paul says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. So it's not unreasonable for us to be able to provide to God a living sacrifice to the best of our ability and the best of the things that we know as we continue to learn and follow what he provides for us. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Tonight, our focus is the hawthorn, Crataegus mangana, and this is a fairly common tree across the nation, often found as an ornamental or as a kind of a standalone wild tree. You can see it growing here in full blossom. It's also known as thorn apple or May tree. It's a member of the rose family. So like apples, like roses, it's in Rosaceae. So there's some similar properties associated with it. It has long woody thorns on the branches. So that's one of the key identifying features of the hawthorn. It presents either in the bush form or the tree form. It's often found wild along path and trail edges, but can be found in open fields or as an ornamental in various plantings in various landscapes. The red berries are attractive, as are the blossoms. So the flowers here you see are white, but they can be found in red or pink. It's a May bloomer, so that's the kind of late spring is when it blooms. And the flowers are less than an inch in size, have 5 petals. And the berries are very small, and they ripen. When they ripen, they start just brilliant red, but as they age, they can go towards more black. The berries are edible, kind of a sweet, sour taste to them, and often when they're used, honey or some sweetener is appreciated as they're consumed. So the leaves you can see here are if you took just an outline around and connected tip ends, they'd be ovate. They're alternate, but they have the deep serrations in between them, so those deep cuts in the leaves. They're very dark green, and you can see the sharp teeth, the indentations there, the dental grooves. And the trees are typically 30 feet or less in size, so they don't get to be huge, but they can be quite sprawling, as this example shows here, or they can be rather quite scrawny, depending on where they're growing and what their habitat is. The thorns can get up 2 inches in length and are very sharp. I remember playing with hawthorn needles as a kid thorns, making them as needles for thread, kind of outdoor needles for pulling thread or grass through various weaving types of things. So eating the fruit. The fruit is the portion of the tree that is edible. You can eat them just raw. They look like little rose hips, and they are quite tart. They're high in vitamin C, actually, but they can be eaten raw or cooked. They're more palatable when they're cooked, and often are used in jams and jellies. Of course, they're going to have some kind of a sweetener associated with that, which increases the palatability. But you can also dehydrate them and grind them. When you're dehydrating them, you want to just poke the skin so that the moisture can come out of them more easily, or cut them in half. That seems like that would be a little bit of a tedious process because they are quite small. You can also add them, the grindings, to breads or to vegetarian pemmican with kinnikinnick, and so they can make a nice addition to that in the dried fruit form. So the young shoots, so there'll be the fresh growth or the suckers that would grow on, can be eaten. The dried leaves make a nice tasting tea, and the seeds can be roasted and ground into a flavorful hot drink. The flowers, the fresh flowers, can be used to flavor puddings and various syrups, kind of in a syrup fashion. It'd be more like almost like an infusion, or a like an oil infusion, so to speak, where as opposed to a tea, you would put the flowers into the syrup, and it would extract some of the qualities, the flavor qualities out of it. So you can see that the birds, there's a bohemian or cedar waxwing here in the lower left, really like the berries of the hawthorn as well. And you can see a hawthorn tea there in the center from the berries, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along here. And the leaves and berries can make a loose leaf tea that can be utilized as well in the lower right. So hawthorn berry tea. So take 1 tablespoon of the dried hawthorn berries and a cup of boiling water, and you can use some raw honey as an optional flavor toner downer, I guess you would call it. Kind of take the edge off of it. Steep the berries for 8 to 10 minutes. The longer you steep it, the stronger it's going to be. So it may have a larger pucker factor because it is an astringent. And then strain it and drink it. Some people may just have the berries bobbing around there. If they're in a smaller fashion, you may just put them into a diffusing ball like you see in the upper right, and then add the honey if you desire that. So it has a very dense concentrations of antioxidants. So some that you're probably familiar with are quercetin. That's a very common one right now. That is a powerful antioxidant, very helpful in helping to mitigate inflammation. It's present in apples. It's highly present in onions as well, but it also is densely concentrated here in the hawthorn. Procyanoids, cyanids, malic acid, citric acid, and various flavonoids. So the flavonoids are the pigment components that give it the deep red color. And anytime you have pigment that is rich and deep, you're going to have great flavonoids present that have antioxidant and free radical protective effects, as well as a wide array of minerals. So you can get those from the hawthorn berry tea. Looking at the hawthorn from a medicinal usage standpoint, it has antispasmodic, sedative, and tonic effects. So antispasmodic would help to keep muscles from spasming. Sedative would help calm and reduce stress for sleep time. And as a tonic, it's just a general body strengthener and enhancer. So the role of a tonic. A tonic is more of a long-term usage beneficial factor as opposed to a short-term effect. So typically when you're looking at pharmaceutical interventions, they have a more significant short-term effect. People want to see an immediate effect as opposed to something that has a tonic effect, a powerful effect that is not immediately felt, but felt with extended usage. So sometimes people will think that nothing's happening, but just stay the course and give it a chance to work. So it has heart strengthening effects. It aids both in elevated blood pressure and in raising low blood pressure. So sometimes we have low blood pressure issues, which is less of a problem typically, but high blood pressure is more common in today's environment. So the tea benefits the nervous tension and insomnia. So you can use it in a tea or a capsule form, depending on how your palate adjusts to that. Some people, the tea is just too sharp for them, and the capsule of the leaves is preferential, or from the dried berries. If you're using capsules 1 to 2 per day, you can make a tea from the flower as well. So Hawthorn flower tea. So 1 teaspoon of the flowers, those would be dried. So you'd pick them and collect them when they are fresh and blooming, and then a half cup of boiling water, and steep that water, steep the flowers in that water, that half cup, and then use 1 to 2 cups of the Hawthorn tea per day, 1 swallow at a time. So not just chugging it or drinking it, but just kind of allow it to come in and enter the mouth and through the mucous membranes in the oral cavity. So some primary beneficial aspects of Hawthorn: function and focus on the heart, actually very beneficial for heart health. So taken daily, the tea or the tincture is the way it's primarily taken. It's considered very safe, although there are some people who do have a tendency who can have allergic reactions to it. We'll mention this again too, but that's true with most anything. You have to kind of start with a small amount and see how your body handles it, because you don't want to take a lot of something that you have never used before and then have some kind of a reaction to it. So that's just a precautionary principle approach to using anything new. So it's generally considered very safe. So its benefits are found when used for a long duration. So using it regularly and over time gives it the best benefit. So the taste, honey is helpful for overcoming any sharpness in the taste that may not be agreeable, or you can just simply use it in a granulated form in capsules. So the parts that are used are the berries, the flowers, and the leaves. But we'll see later on that actually there's also a place where the hawthorn bark has some benefits from a medicinal standpoint as well. So various applications for heart health. So heart issues are serious by nature, and if you're dealing with a heart issue, be sure you're consulting with a heart health team that can work with you. If you're using a natural intervention, that's something you should discuss with them. Hopefully they're open to participation in that, and basically functioning as a monitoring mechanism to make sure that you're going to be in a positive way. So just monitoring your signs and any changes and any adjustments that might need to be made, as there would be with any kind of medical intervention, pharmaceutical intervention, or exercise program. So just keep that in mind. So from heart failure recovery, Hawthorn daily usage is very beneficial, along with an exercise program. So many times people who have heart failure haven't had an adequate exercise program, and or have had a diet that is not conducive to heart health. So high fat diet with lots of animal products that have cholesterol associated with it, especially in its oxidized form, and processed foods of all different types, known as the SAD diet, or the standard American diet. So you want to kind of steer towards a heart healthy diet, which is low fat, zero cholesterol, because your body makes endogenous cholesterol in the liver, and any cholesterol that you need, your body is able to produce on its own. And whole plant foods. So that way you're getting all the fiber, you're getting all the nutrients that are present in a synergistic form. So on the right here is an occluded major artery. So that looks like it's called an arterial plaque that is constricted the flow of blood significantly in this case. On the left, you can see another occluded artery at a branch. Essentially, blood flow in a normal blood vessel flows by unrestricted, but as there is inflammation that occurs in the vessel lining, we have deposits of cholesterol and other factors that are attempting to mitigate that inflammatory reaction, and can end up creating a blockage that restricts flow past the point, which then can cause heart muscle death, as well as other implications where circulation is important, like brain health, extremity function and sensation and warmth. So anywhere circulation goes, cholesterol will go, and there may be impeding elements that occur from the presence of these arterial plaques, so whatever form they are. So Hawthorn can aid the symptoms of heart disease by helping to lower blood pressure, improving heart rate and cardiac output, as well as increasing tolerance for moderate exercise. So Hawthorn on its own has some pretty powerful effects, but you really need to look at the underlying basis of what those heart issues are. And typically it ties back to diet and exercise. And then in conjunction with Hawthorn can make some positive steps forward. If you just do Hawthorn, you're probably going to wind up still in dire straits if you just continue on with the same habits of activity that have led up to this point. So angina, which is essentially heart pain, essentially blood flow to the heart has been restricted, and it's basically a heart disease symptom. And Hawthorn can help to mitigate the agents that cause that heart pain and the blood flow restrictions. So essentially the plaque buildup may actually just be a response to the inflammation that the oxidized cholesterol and other inflammatory agents, because we know that heart disease, as well as all other disease processes, basically have an underlying basis of inflammation. If you can keep inflammation at bay and do that through whole food plants that have all the protective effects, the antioxidants that are inherently found in tree ripened fruit and healthy vegetables, that's going to protect you the best. And can do a significant part of outweighing the negative effects of other things we do. But if we can choose to not do those other things, even though they may taste better to the palate that we currently have, we can actually change our palate by changing our diet and sticking with it. Our tastes can change. A woman by the name of Hulda Crooks lived to her 90s, climbed Whitney numerous times in her old age. She made the statement that she figured that the head was on top and that of the body, and because of its position there, it ought to rule. It shouldn't be the rest of our stomach or other entities, our tongue. The brain is superior to the tongue, so need to keep that in mind. So basically it can function as a blood vessel dilator and improve blood flow systemically. And it's actually most effective when using mild aerobic exercise. So diet, exercise, and Hawthorn can work together. Now there's a chart here that I put in that's very interesting. It's actually contrasting rural and urban people. And the thing that I noticed right away was that what was considered normal for rural individuals was 5 points lower in blood pressure than what was considered normal in urban. And that was just quite striking to me, just interesting. It has a p-value of 0.0001, which means that it's statistically significant to a high degree. It's interesting that this is, the blood pressures looked a little low to me, and when I looked at where it actually came from, it actually comes from data taken from school children. So these are kids, so blood pressures from kids. And you know, we know with the standard American diet that there are many children that are experiencing hypertension due to early onset adult conditions because they have had those dietary effects and sedentary lifestyles that typically come on in later years in our industrial complex lifestyles of today, as opposed to kids typically having the active lifestyle of the past. They've become more sedentary. So irregular heartbeat is actually also benefited. So those individuals who use Hawthorn on a regular basis tend to notice a decrease in any palpitations they may be experiencing. Atherosclerosis, again, is clotting or clogging of the arteries, and it has a blood vessel dilation effect that can help to mitigate that to a degree. And then also high blood pressure. The use of Hawthorn berries, leaves, and flowers can help to reduce the diastolic blood pressure numbers. So the diastolic blood pressure is that pressure which is noted in the blood vessels during the relaxation phase of the heart cycle. So that can elevate, but Hawthorn can help to reduce that number. And it would be considered a tonic, also a modulation effect, in the sense that it will upregulate and increase levels that need to be increased and downregulate and decrease levels that need to be decreased. So that's something that pharmaceuticals can't do, but plant factors are somehow able to do beyond that. They can function the way that our body needs them to. And that's just an amazing gift that God gave us in plants. So regular long-term usage is where we see the best results for people experiencing high blood pressure. And one of the things that may be a beneficial factor in that is the use of pectins. Plant pectins are known to be beneficial for heart issues. So elevated cholesterol levels, we can see that the Hawthorn usage can help reduce low density lipoprotein, that's the bad cholesterol levels, and helps to reduce overall cholesterol. So that makes sense. If you're reducing one number, you're going to reduce the overall amount, and also improves the fat content of the blood, the triglycerides. And liver cholesterol, as well as improving the ability to lose body fat with that moderate exercise that is being engaged in along with the Hawthorn and a better diet. So again, the pectin, fruit pectin, and anti-inflammatory effects can both be working to mitigate those effects. So some tonic benefits of the Hawthorn: anti-inflammatory, again, very antioxidant rich. They help to shepherd out and escort free radicals from the body by essentially providing that free electron that the destabilized oxygen is looking for, rather than having it damaging whole molecules that are important to our body and tissues. The plant factors that we bring in that have antioxidant components can donate their electrons to that and mitigate damage to healthy tissues and structures and head it on out of the body without doing damage. So it protects against what's known as oxidative stress. That's the damage that occurs by these oxygen-free radicals. Also, it has an antibacterial effect. It can eliminate many different types of bacterial strains and has an overall organ protective effect that's seen. Some immune system benefits. So the antioxidants help to boost the immune system. One of those is vitamin C. It's very rich in vitamin C, and that's nice because it's one of those berries that tends to hang on the trees through the year, through the winter, which is true with rose hips as well. Kinnikinnick, we talked about that a few weeks back. And vitamin C is one of those vitamins that is typically found in fresh vegetables and greens that are in short supply in the wintertime. And so this is a good source of vitamin C that is packaged and waiting for us to use them through the wintertime. It also aids in toxin elimination and improves the ability of our white blood cells, that's the WBCs, and their ability to fight infection. It also helps to mitigate intestinal infections and aid digestion. Hawthorn tea improves digestion, whether it be the flower tea or the berry tea. Can also make a tea from the leaves. Helps to reduce constipation, bloating, and cramping, and other intestinal infections, including elimination of intestinal parasites like tapeworms or ascaris. So that's kind of interesting that it would do that. It makes me wonder, there are some other things that are having some positive effects in respiratory diseases that have the same basic function of intestinal parasite removal, and there may be some similar properties that are latent here that haven't been researched or utilized at this point. Just an interesting thought question. It's also helpful for skin issues. So topical use of Hawthorn can be used in salves, tinctures, and teas that are used as washes. And it can help skin irritations like eczema or psoriasis, swelling, rashes, itching, and initiate and promote wound healing. So Hawthorn has a variety of utilitarian functions within the medicinal realm, as well as being edible. So various types of fevers, malaria, and other fevers, Hawthorn bark can help to mitigate that. So it has an astringent effect and also promotes sweating. So in that way, it actually can aid the treatment of fever. When you're harvesting Hawthorn, you can collect the flowers and leaves when they're present. So that'd be in May, and then on through the summer for the leaves. If you have a small tree, you don't collect all the flowers, you're not going to have any berries. So when you're dehydrating them, just make sure that you mechanically poke them or cut them in half and dry them in either a dehydrator or in a warm, dry space. That way they can have their moisture be completely extracted through that dehydration process, and then stored in a sealed container in a cool, dry, dark storage area. So again, anytime you start anything new, you want to do it in moderation, just in case you happen to be allergic to it. It's considered a very safe plant to use, but some people can have allergic reactions to it. Some symptoms that may be associated with that are upset stomach and fatigue, sweating, nausea, dizziness, agitation. Now, we don't have this with most things, but there are some that can have this kind of effect. Interestingly enough, heart irregularities with those who may have an allergic reaction to it, breath shortness, mood swings. So just consult if you're taking any kind of medication. You can consult with a pharmacist. There's something called the Pharmacist Network Exchange, or even your local pharmacist should be able to look up and see if there's any contraindications with any medications that you may currently be taking, because most drugs have not ever been tested in combination with any others. Most people are taking a cocktail of some kind of pharmaceutical intervention, but they have never actually been used or tested in those combinations, but prior to being utilized in that way. So many times that cocktail of pharmaceutical interventions are basically drugs to treat the side effects of various drugs in their various applications. So you wind up with a handful of this and that. So pharmacists should be able to help you with any interaction possibility with any medication that you may be already using. So making a Hawthorn extract or tincture. So you can use 1 pint of 80 proof vodka, and that would be for external use. Or apple cider vinegar can also be used, or vegetable glycerin for internal usage. So use a sterile glass jar with a tight lid, and then place the berries in the jar up to a 1/2 inch at the top. So this example of a tincture here has already been completed. In fact, it should have a higher level of fluid in it, but maybe it's already been drawn off. If it's alcohol, it's going to have a tendency to evaporate away, even with a tight lid to some degree. You're not going to see that with the apple cider vinegar or the vegetable glycerin to that same extent. So cover the berries with the fluid of choice above, cap it tightly, and then let that steep for 6 to 8 weeks in a cool, dark place. Shake the jar daily, and that's going to allow the agitation, increases the fluid matrix moving around the surface area of the berries that are in the fluid to extract their medicinal qualities. And then after that 6 to 8 weeks with the daily agitation, just filter the berries and keep the fluid, and that's what you're going to keep as your tincture and store it and label it. So the vinegar and the glycerin tinctures typically have a shorter lifespan than the alcohol-based ones, but they can be used internally without introducing any alcohol into the system. So there is a paper that I found, Health Effects of Hawthorn by Damer and Scott, an American family physician, in 2010. And basically from their abstract, they note that Hawthorn has a long favored European remedy, and it's a slow-acting cardiotonic agent. So tonic, again, is health-promoting. Cardio is heart, so it's a heart health-promoting agent. And they're thought to be from the flavonoids and other oligomeric procyanidins, which are some compounds in the hawthorn. So they've seen improvement in clinical symptoms like blood pressure, heart rate, left ventricular ejection fraction, and the patient's subjective sense of well-being was improved. And overall, hawthorn was well tolerated. So that's looking at hawthorn as not only an edible food, but also something that we can look at for particularly heart health from a medicinal standpoint. And if you'd like to see this presentation again or other presentations, you can go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com, and they are archived there for your convenience.